Alrighty, hello everyone, my name is Ray, and it's going to be another carrier video. This one we're going to be talking about the Saipan Tier 8 American Premium Carrier. And we're basically doing this video because in my last Saipan video that I just uploaded, I actually didn't really go in depth with what she had, what kind of planes, what kind of ordnance she has, what kind of build, and why we chose that kind of build on this carrier. So if you guys haven't checked out the previous video regarding the Saipan, it is a bottom tier match. We actually get close to 300,000 damage, and it was a fairly close game too. And somehow we managed to clutch it. So if you guys haven't checked that out, I'll put it up somewhere on the screen up here. You'll see a little indicator, and you can check that out. But yeah, tier 8 Saipan. So a lot of people say Saipan is the worst carrier. A lot of people say it is very bad for its tier, and she's quite suffering. All those things, they can be true depending on how matchmaker treats you. But for the most part, I believe she is a fairly solid tier 8 premium. It's just that her skill floor is just way up there compared to all the other carriers that we have in the game that are fairly low. So definitely, to play her properly, it requires some positioning and plane reserves control. You really have to know exactly whether or not the strike that you're going to be taking on a target is worth the amount of planes lost. So we'll get to that later, talking about how to play her. For her general stats on her planes, you have 3 different squadrons: the Tiny Tim rockets that you see on Lexingtons, and also the Midway. These are the exact same rocket style. It's just that instead of Midway's very powerful overall rocket count, you instead have only 3. And you have 2 planes per attack run, so you have 6 total. And on top of that, for the total amount of squadron, planes in your squadron size, you have 6 total, so you have 3 strikes with that single flight. Realistically, you're not really going to be trying to focus destroyers with this just because of the low rocket count. Mainly going to be focusing cruisers or battleships or even other carriers, for example. And the regeneration on this, as you guys can see, with the full build, it's going to be a 111 seconds of regeneration time. That is fairly long, and that is going to be a ongoing theme with the Saipan. You have very low reserves, but you have up-tiered planes. You have tier 9 planes on a tier 8 carrier with boats in more speed on the planes, the bigger HP pool, but at the downside, you're going to be having the extremely long regeneration timers. So there it is for the rockets. And now we're going to move over to the torpedo bombers, probably what she's most known for. These things hit like a truck. You have 2400 HP, your maximum speed is 170 knots, fastest in its tier compared to the other tier 8 American carriers. And same thing with this one, 6 planes total in the squadron, and you have 2 per attacking flight, and you drop 2 torps per plane. So total, you're going to be dropping 4 torps in a single strike. You can chain strike that 3 total times. Aircraft on deck, you have 11. And it's basically the same thing as the rockets, and now soon going to be the bombers. 11 total in your reserves if you take the slot 5 flight control modification 1, which is pretty much mandatory on the Saipan because you have such low reserves without it. But these torpedo bombers, I'm trying to talk a little bit more about them. The way how these work is they have a very wide spread of reticle, and once they're aimed down all the way, they're fairly tight. I believe they're a little bit smaller in width than I believe is a Kagero or any other tier 8 destroyer. So the reticle does aim down fairly low, fairly small size, and if you can get that aim down properly, you can really pretty much consistently land 4 or maybe 3 torps every single strike. And these torps, these are the American torpedoes for its tier, so 6400 damage. And if you land all 4 in a single attack, I believe Saipan has the second or third highest torpedo alpha per single strike. Number 1 is definitely going to be the Chkalov. Number 2 or 3 is definitely going to be the other Soviet carrier, the, what's it called again? The Pobeda. And Saipan is going to be somewhere along those lines. But the thing about the Russian carriers is they drop all of their torpedoes in 1 strike. Saipan is able to do this in 3 total. So she easily gets just all of her damage out if you can get 3 strikes off. And because of the HP that her plane carries and the heal as well, if you're able to get a lone cruiser or a battleship that has nearly no AA, you can pretty much death strike. You can pretty much death strike the ship, which is pretty funny, but also it's kind of toxic. And because of this torpedo alpha, if you time it properly, you can actually kill the other carrier in 2 torpedo strikes and either a single rocket strike or a dive bombing run. Very, very powerful. These torpedo bombers are definitely her strongest tool and the bread and butter of her kit, so you really want to cherish this squadron as much as possible. So number 3, the final squadron is going to be the dive bombers. These are, I would say, similar interaction. These feel similar to how Kaga's dive bombers are, the bombs itself, because of just how wonky the dispersion is. Enterprise, I believe, has 75% chance to land on the inner circle of her bombs. Meanwhile, Saipan has, I believe it's a 50-50. Either 50-50 or 25% chance to land on the center circle, which is fairly bad. And because she only has 2 bombs per plane, and the same thing with 2 in the attacking flight, 6 total in the squadron, it's going to be 2-2-2, and each plane has 2 bombs, so you're dropping 4. But these things, these are the normal 67mm penetration with very good fire chance, the American bombs, right? Because you're only dropping 4, and the reticle is kind of long vertically. It feels kind of like how Enterprise would, but because you have such low bomb count, fairly RNG if you're trying to hit a destroyer with these. And Saipan kind of suffers a little bit trying to deal with destroyers if they're able to get up close to the Saipan and threaten her. You just kind of have to rely on RNG at this point. It's not like the Lexington, where I believe Lexington dropped 6 bombs total. There's three planes in the attacking flight and 2 bombs. Yeah, so 6 total. Meanwhile, the Midway also has 6 bombs, so the more bomb count is usually just better, it's more consistent. Saipan has 2 bombs per plane, so it's 4 total in the drop. And because of that, I believe Saipan's dive bombers are her weakest squadrons, just because of how vulnerable they are to anti-air. Because they do the usual raise in altitude and then do the dive. And because of that whole animation, you're basically sitting in close range AA for the most part of your entire attacking strike. You're basically setting these out just because you're just trying to wait for like your rotations or your planes to come back after their strike, your rockets and torpedo bombers. Pretty much these bombs, I don't really value these bombs as much. I would try to rarely use them because they are slow and most vulnerable, so it's not really worth trying to actually focus on these to deal damage because it's very RNG related. Okay, so the build, the upgrades, slot 1 and 2, mandatory for every single carrier. I don't see why you would use anything else here. It's not really no point. Slot 3, I would personally go the modification 1 torpedo bombers because 5-second extra time on your torpedo strike means more time to aim down that reticle, which also means you can start your attack run further away from the incoming anti-air circles. This just gives you more room for your aiming to be more precise, more consistent. So you're not always striking with an extremely wide reticle, because these torpedo bombers, they are quite sensitive when they are trying to aim down all the way. So that's why I like to take torpedo bomber modification 1. You can take the aerial torpedoes if you do like the 5%. I just don't think that is really worth it for the +2 knots, because when you do improve your torpedo speed, you are going to be pretty much ruining your really good arming distance of 423 meters. I like to keep my arming distance at that. 35 knots, it's slow, but it's doable because you're going to be focusing larger units anyway. You're not going to be striking like a light cruiser or a destroyer. You can just lead properly. So as long as you get that ship stuck in a crossfire, or he's like trying to mid-turn and you can fly around to get that proper angle, you're going to be landing pretty much most of your torps for the most part. Because I do like my torpedo bombers the most, I stuck around with the torpedo modification 2 for the improved 7.5% HP. And these are definitely going to be the ones I spam the most. This is where most of my damage comes from, right? Slot 5, we went over this. You need the preparation time. But the preparation time is not really that big of a thing because of how long your squadron regeneration time is. You're mainly taking this for the +2 planes in your reserves, because without this, you'll be stuck at 9 in reserves for all 3 squadrons. It's very bad, so you definitely want to take this for the +2 count. Now for the actual build, this build I do share with the FDR. If you do want to have your own specific Saipan commander, I would say drop the anti-flak skill, put it into sidestab. You can drop this improved engine boost skill, and you can put it into heal. So that way, you're prioritizing most utility into your torpedo bombers, but also having the maximum survival for them as well. The extra heal is helpful, especially in the later stages of the game, when you do start to run low on your reserves. And as for the skill order, definitely want to take air supremacy, helps you out just a bit. Improved engines. And then I'll take these 2 survival skills next, back to back, instead of going straight ahead for a 4-pointer skill. Reason for this is because you want to maximize your survival on your planes as much as possible. I'll say this will be a must for any carrier for the 1, 2, 3, 4 skills in order. And then after that, you can go for proxy fuse or the enhanced aircraft armor if you want to. I'll probably go with Proxy Fuse, and then after that, you can go whatever utility skills you want, maybe Last Gasp next, because you are going to be pre-dropping quite a bit, and when you do the pre-drop, you'll be down to 4 planes. Maybe you'll lose 2 on the attack run, and then on your next 2 planes that gets focused, you can have your engine boost regenerated all the way, which helps a lot. So, Saipan, how she plays. We're going to briefly talk over the ship itself. You're mainly going to be focusing larger ships, battleships, larger cruisers, maybe the other aircraft carrier. She is a light carrier, so her concealment is fairly good. 11.9, it's really good. Maneuverability is pretty solid. Look how small she is. Anti-air, she has 3.5 kilometers of anti-air. Her continuous damage is fairly high. You know, if a carrier is trying to focus you down and he sits in that anti-air bubble, for some reason he's within the 3.5 kilometers of range, you're going to be shooting things down fairly easily. So maybe he drops a fighter on you, you could just shoot it down immediately. But other than this, you're not really going to be defending yourself against another carrier strike. Maybe something like a Kaga or Shokaku. Anything that can just bully you, you know, a Soviet carrier dropping you with skip bombers. You're going to pretty much suffer. So that's why Saipan is also a very, while she does have the benefit of having up-tier planes, a very high alpha on her squadrons, she suffers greatly from basically just how vulnerable she is to other carriers, but also her reserves are being very low in count and very high in regeneration timers. So definitely a very difficult carrier to play, and I know a lot of people did manage to get Saipan from either the Black Friday event for, you know, Saipan Black Friday, or possibly even from the Christmas containers that is happening right now. Definitely when you play Saipan, you wanna plan your moves ahead of time, trying to figure out what is the best target, when should I strike this, if this strike is even worth it, and try to communicate with your team, trying to get the best drop as possible, because every strike definitely matters on the Saipan. Every plane lost is going to be hurting you in the late game. Saipan is fairly difficult, but I would say it's not impossible to play. Even when you're bottom tier, you're a carrier still, so you can spot targets that need to be dealt with. If your battleships manage to deal with a light cruiser that's tier 10, possibly maybe Worcester or Minotaur, that opens the game up for you. You can start taking more aggressive approaches to your strikes, but for the most part, Saipan is fairly tricky in the current meta. I don't see why anyone would voluntarily pick the Saipan over, let's say, a Soviet carrier like the Chkalov, the Pobeda, or even the Lexington Enterprise. They're all fairly good choices right now. I feel like they always will be, unless they get heavily nerfed, like Focus carrier nerfed. Kaga also exists, so everything in the lineup is just so competitive. And Saipan's gimmick was the fact that she had up-tier planes for a tier 8 carrier, but now we have all these other carriers that have extremely high reserves for down-tier planes like the Kaga, or just the overall consistency that the Lexington and the Shokaku has, or just the ability to just mitigate as much anti-air as possible with the Soviet carriers, and there's extremely long attacking strike distances. All these things is just, I just don't really see the point of playing Saipan currently in the meta, unless you're trying to have a little challenge or somehow enjoy the carrier, right? Historical carrier, she was real, Baltimore class conversion, so if you like that, well, good on you, right? But yeah, that's basically going to be it for the Saipan. Again, I'll remind you guys that if you guys haven't seen the previous video, it was a live stream highlight, and we do play against tier 10s, and an extremely close match. Definitely check that out. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed this one, let me know about your feelings on the Saipan on this type of video setup. I'll try to do in the future videos, I'll try to do like something like talking about the carrier itself for each specific ship, each specific carrier, and then adding like a gameplay afterwards. But for this special case, because I didn't really do this kind of thing in the previous one of my Saipan video, this is going to be like a standalone. So if you guys enjoyed it, again, let me know, and it will be extremely helpful to just have any pointers or anything that I've missed, or any type of thoughts on like a future video and stuff like this, right? So yeah, hope you guys have a good one, and I will see you guys next time.